A man ventured alone into a water-filled cave. He went exploring, but he never came out. Strangely, his companions chose neither to call the police nor to search for him. This leads us to today's story, the Fairy Lake diving accident in Romania. Fairy Lake is located in Romania's Carpathian Mountains, a region famously known as the birthplace of Count Dracula. This area is covered with pristine forests, where wild bears often roam, but it is most famous for its ancient caves. Bear Grylls has visited this place before. The cave he crossed in *Man vs. Wild * is the most well-known in the region, Pectera Patic Mare. This cave is often submerged in water. The cave is often flooded with water, and eventually merging to 0.5 kilometers away at a spring. That spring is the setting for today's story, and this spring is the setting of our story this time, Ceramic Kangar Spring, which is in Man vs. Wild, the pool where Bear Grylls made his iconic jump. Despite its beauty, Fairy Lake's high altitude keeps its water temperature extremely cold. Even in summer, the average temperature remains around 5 degrees Celsius, making it unsuitable for swimming. Although the lake's water is stunningly beautiful, its high altitude keeps the water temperature low, with an average of just 5 degrees Celsius, even in summer. This makes it completely unsuitable for swimming. The cave currently has an explored depth of 105 meters. The overall structure of the cave is not complex, resembling a golf club. In 1982, a group of cliff hunters first dived here and reached a depth of 55 meters. In 2001, Polish diving pioneer Polek set a record by reaching a depth of 85 meters. Since then, many diving enthusiasts have focused on this site, hoping to break Polek's record. On November 4, 2002, another Polish diver, 30-year-old Rafał, arrived at Fairy Lake with his team. In the days prior, they had dived into the cave several times, aiming to familiarize themselves with the cave environment. However, their dives had all stayed above 45 meters. Today, Rafał planned to dive alone to break the record. His teammates remained at the spring to provide support. At 2:45 p.m., Rafał officially entered the water. According to the original plan, this exploration was planned to be completed within 2 hours. At the start, he carried a total of 5 air tanks, 2 with regular compressed air, 2 with nitrogen-oxygen mixed gas, and 1 filled with argon gas. The first 4 tanks were for breathing at different depths, while the argon gas was used to inflate his dry suit. Given the water temperature was only around 5 degrees Celsius, even though Rafał was wearing a dry suit, he could still feel the biting cold. Due to the increased water flow, visibility underwater that day was also poor. Yet none of this deterred Rafał from his desire to break the record. He swam alone, relying solely on his headlamp, moving slowly in the cold, dark water. Occasionally mud or fish would hit his body. All of this made Rafał both nervous and excited. If everything went as planned, in 2 hours, his name would forever be tied to Fairy Lake. The interior of Fairy Lake's cave is not entirely underwater. At a depth of 45 meters, there's an air pocket. According to the plan, Rafał would reach this spot to perform an air tank switch. This meant switching his breathing gas from a regular compressed air tank to a mixed gas better suited for deep diving. The mixed gas was nitrogen-oxygen based. To conserve energy and gas supply, the used tanks would be left in the air pocket to be retrieved later during decompression on the way back up. While Rafał was diving in the cave, his teammates waiting by Fairy Lake had little to do. They passed the time chatting while waiting for Rafał to resurface, and so 2 hours quickly went by. However, Rafał did not return as expected. They considered that dives often take longer than initially planned, and since Rafał had ample air supply, they were not overly worried. They did nothing, continuing to wait by the lake for over an hour, but Rafał still did not emerge. At this point, they realized something might have gone wrong. Yet, they made a decision that was difficult to understand. Instead of seeking help from local authorities, they contacted an organization in their home country, Poland's Alpine Caving Association. They sought help from the leader of this organization, who was the same person that set the 85-meter record at Fairy Lake. However, it would take at least 2 days for them to arrive from Poland. This meant that if Rafał was still alive at that moment, he would almost certainly be dead by the time they arrived. Despite this, the group neither went down to check, nor reported the incident to the authorities. Instead, they returned to their hotel to rest. The following day, they came back to Fairy Lake. After a brief discussion, one of them decided to dive and take a look. However, he only dived as far as 45 meters to the air pocket at that depth. He assumed that if Rafał had encountered trouble, he would likely have returned to this air pocket to take refuge. But Rafał was not there. Even more strangely, the 2 air tanks Rafał was supposed to leave behind were also missing. The diver then resurfaced. After discussing the situation, the group decided to return to the hotel once again. During this time, they still did not contact the authorities. Another day passed. The next day, someone suggested they search again. This time, a different team member volunteered to dive. Eventually, during this dive, he reached an underwater depth. At a depth of 78 meters, Rafał's body was discovered. He was lying quietly on a piece of sedimentary rock. All 5 air tanks were still strapped to his body. His companion attempted to inflate Rafał's dry suit, but was unsuccessful, unable to bring the body to the surface. He decided to return to the surface first. Upon hearing the news that Rafał was confirmed dead, the group returned to their hotel again to wait. It wasn't until the 3rd day after Rafał's death, on October 7th, that Polak and his team arrived from Poland. They immediately reported the incident to the Romanian police. However, there were no divers more qualified than them in the area. After a day of rest and preparation, Polak and his team began their recovery attempt on October 8th. Unfortunately, their first attempt failed. On October 9th, they made a second attempt. This time, they successfully inflated Rafał's dry suit. Finally, after several hours, Rafał's body was recovered. A few hours later, his body was brought to the surface successfully. Afterward, Romanian authorities immediately launched an investigation into the incident. A few weeks later, based on their findings and an inspection of the equipment, they provided their own hypothesis about the cause of Rafał's death. Rafał, carrying 5 air tanks, successfully descended to the air pocket. There, he switched from regular compressed air to mixed gas suitable for deep diving. At this point, he should have detached the 2 air tanks. However, for some unknown reason, Rafał decided to continue the dive while keeping the tanks. By doing this, he may have intended to use the tanks to increase his weight, allowing him to descend faster. However, this was not the direct cause of his death. The real issue lay with his dry diving suit. Here, we need to briefly explain the basics of diving suits. For regular diving activities at depths up to 30 meters, a wetsuit is generally sufficient. However, at greater depths, the water temperature gradually decreases, and the pressure increases significantly. At such depths, wetsuits are compressed to a very thin layer, rendering them almost useless for insulation. Dry suits, on the other hand, are entirely different. Their thickness and internal lining remain unchanged, providing better insulation in deeper and colder water. Additionally, dry diving suits have another crucial function. They can be inflated or deflated to control buoyancy. When descending, releasing air from the suit can speed up the descent. Similarly, inflating the suit when ascending can speed up the rise. Much like a submarine, the suit is equipped with valves to adjust buoyancy, allowing the diver to maintain neutral buoyancy underwater. However, after an inspection by experts, it was discovered that Rafał's inflation system was leaking. If he was unable to inflate his dry suit, the weight of the 5 air tanks would make ascending extremely difficult. Additionally, this would accelerate his air consumption. Moreover, although dry suits provide good insulation, their effectiveness is limited. Inflating the suit with gas, such as argon, can extend the insulation limit. This is because argon is a gas with excellent thermal insulation properties. Once the suit could no longer be inflated, Rafał not only struggled to ascend, but he also began to succumb to hypothermia. The intense water pressure likely made movement impossible. Thus, Rafał likely sank to the bottom in pain and despair, like a stone sinking into the depths. During this time, he could do nothing but helplessly watch. Eventually, under the effects of hypothermia, he slowly lost consciousness and passed away. As for the behavior of Rafał's companions, the police did not investigate further. They believed there was insufficient motive for a crime. Rafał's death was ultimately ruled an accident, attributed to cold water shock. Afterward, with approval from local authorities, Rafał's family and friends installed a memorial plaque near Ferry Lake to honor his memory. If you visit today, you can still see it by the water. It is worth mentioning that Polak, who participated in the rescue effort, tragically died 2 years later in Germany due to carbon dioxide poisoning during a dive training session. Regarding Rafał's death, I personally believe it wasn't caused by malice, but simply a lack of experience within the team. Similar accidents are relatively common in cave diving. What do you, the viewers, think? Well, that concludes today's video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.